One of the most common topics in the personal development world is procrastination. How do you defeat procrastination? Is it defeatable? How do I get the motivation to do what I need to do? And chances are, if you've stumbled across this topic, you've already seen plenty of viral videos and articles giving you quick hacks and tips on these topics. Unfortunately, chances are they didn't work. A lot of these quick gimmicks and hacks only get you so far. Putting a social media blocker on your browser, for example, isn't necessarily going to solve all the problems, because chances are you've tried that and then after a few days you just unblock it because it's just too much of a hassle and you just love social media that much. So how exactly do you actually go about defeating procrastination? In this video, I want to introduce some actual techniques, tips, some new ideas that you may not have heard before that can actually put a dent in your procrastination. You know, all these little sayings and hacks, I'm actually going to debunk a lot of them, explain why they don't work and why you should avoid them, despite them being such common and widely accepted tactics. That's the really unfortunate part about it that makes me a little upset. I think there's a lot of very popular practices out there, some that are great, which we'll cover, and some that just don't work and yet constantly get rewarded by views and likes and everyone thinks are great. So let's just get right into it. And we're going to skip over really quickly. We're going to skip over why we procrastinate, because at the end of the day, when I think about it, why does explaining that matter? You know, maybe some of you are more genetically inclined to procrastinate, which the modern world does not reward, and you're in a world where you're more susceptible than ever before to distractions. But does telling you that help you? If anything, it either makes you want to give up or just feel like the world is against you. So how exactly do you fix procrastination? Well, one of the first things that I think actually works is using procrastination as a sign, an opportunity, rather than some obstacle. Because when you study the most successful people in the world, from Michael Jordan to Tony Hawk to Warren Buffett, you discover that they loved what they did so much that they would have done it for free. And when you think about it through that lens, you realize that they're never going to procrastinate on something that they love. It's their hobby. It's something that they would do whenever they had free time. They would beg their parents to do more of it. So then think about that to you. Maybe procrastination is simply a sign that you're doing something that you don't like, and that's not going to change. And I've learned that the hard way. There are definitely things I've done. You know, I wanted to be a doctor for many years, even took the MCAT. And throughout that time, I was procrastinating and trying to use my sheer willpower, which was pretty strong, above average, to beat out my procrastination. And it only got me so far, and I knew that 10, 20 years down the line, I would still procrastinate on studying and medical terminology because it was so boring to me. It was not interesting. And of course, all the tactics in the world wouldn't help as much. So procrastination could simply be a sign to pivot and find something that you can make into a hobby and into a career that earns you income. Because chances are that's really the reason why you want to do it in the first place, because you think you have to do it because it'll make you money or bring you a livelihood in the future. Well, is that actually the case? Maybe you can find another career. And now, more than ever before in history, you're able to monetize your passions. And it's not easy, but it's definitely more possible than ever before. And there's plenty of YouTube channels that cover how to do that through online businesses or freelancing and so forth. So we're not going to cover it here. But that's a huge sign and a first thing to mention. Like even small things like doing laundry or cleaning your room, you know, maybe one day you can outsource that. Maybe not soon, but you know, if you can earn an extra $100 a month, which is not much, it's not millions, it's not hundreds of thousands, $100 a month can get you a decent cleaner. So let's put that aside and let's just now cover some principles and tactics and bad advice for those moments where you still have to do something you hate. Maybe you're still in school, and for the time being, you have to take that stupid history test because that teacher has to give you an A so you can get into a good school, an Ivy League school, and then you can forget about history. But until then, you have to do something you dislike, which is history. So how do you not procrastinate doing something like that? Well, there's a lot of mindset shifts and techniques being thrown out in the marketplace. And a lot of them will revolve around different perspectives around motivation. Some say, oh, it's not about gaining motivation, it's about building momentum. When you see small successes, they build like a snowball on top of each other. And when you see success, you build motivation. So they're really just talking about how you don't need motivation really to start, but once you start seeing success, that's how you build passion or create passion. And I think that only goes so far. I don't think you will create that much passion from something you dislike, no matter how many successes you get, no matter how much money you make. To a degree you can, like you can get a lot from the enjoyment of making money, but not to the extent where you just love it completely. And you can build motivation from this as well. So how do you do that? I recommend, and this is, this has been definitely mentioned before by other creators, but I call it the Nibble Technique. There's many names for it, but essentially you do something very small to begin with. And usually your biggest obstacle is that fear and that your mind making you picture the first step to be so much more difficult or unpleasant than it actually is. And so when you decrease the length, the duration, the intensity of your first step, and you realize it's not so bad, it usually builds momentum so that you end up doing more than you expected, or you end up doing it more frequently over the next few days or weeks. So let's say your goal is to hit 15 pull-ups in a row, but you never even get started because you just feel like it's just going to be so difficult. Then one example of the Nibble Technique is to just tell yourself, just do half a pull-up today, that's it. Or one pull-up, or one pull-up with the bar, or one pull-up jumping up to it. And it's so simple, so small that you can't help but to do it. It's almost like breathing. You can apply this to push-ups, just do half a push-up today, or one push-up today. And then, once you do that one push-up and pull-up, you're like, hey, that's not that bad. And sometimes you do more. Now, how do you continue doing more and more after that? Will that burn you out, or do you just stick to that one pull-up for today and then do 2 tomorrow? I think that's stylistic. From my perspective, there's different personality types, and some people like to go all in. Others don't like to go all in, but to gradually build up, and that's more sustainable for them. Otherwise, they'll burn out from it, and then it just becomes too much, and their fears are confirmed. So I'm more of the latter group, but some people are more of the all-in group. So that's a stylistic thing. So finally, I want to kind of wrap up with a couple final tips and then a little nod to the bad advice out there. I think in terms of bad advice, a lot of people like to mention David Allen's books and one of his techniques, which is to basically anything that takes under 2 minutes to do or 5 minutes to do it now. Because it's just so small that you get it done and it's off your list. I think, once again, this works for certain personality types, but for me, everyone loves David Allen and his productivity techniques. I just don't think they logically make sense to me, and I'm not a big fan. But his book, Getting Things Done, is really popular, and one of his techniques, the one I just mentioned, basically, knocks things off your list. The issue is it doesn't really take into account priorities, and it fails in a lot of other core time management principles, because now you are putting aside more important priorities for something that would take a very short time but could be just distracting or very low priority or just not even urgent at all, but something you should do. And that can end up being a distraction or just something that's really irrelevant in the long run. For some, it helps build momentum, but you have to be careful with that advice. Once again, stylistically, it could work for you if it helps you build momentum. Some people really like that. Like they like making their bed in the morning because it's the first win and it's so simple. It takes 10 seconds to do and it just sets them off in the right course for the day. For something like that, it could work really well. But I could also see it going really bad for others where, all their priority should be building their business and getting more customers, but they're doing all these 2-minute activities like sending emails to you know vending machine companies, or trying to figure out what type of journal they purchase. And most of these things are nothing but distractions and have no impact on their business. So be careful with stuff like that. Another piece of bad advice has to do with kind of motivation and willpower. And a lot of people say, well, motivation and willpower have to be built over time, but you can't rely on them to brute force and, take out something you're procrastinating on. And that's partially true, but they just kind of leave it there as if it's the answer to procrastination. But really, it just leaves your hands up in the air like, okay, so this doesn't work. What else can you do, Or they'll say motivation is the key. You just got to keep building motivation off your successes. And honestly, from personal experience, you've probably experienced this too if you've had dealt any blows to procrastination before. But there's been times where you've had some success, you've completed some projects, but at the end of the day, you're like, man, I really hate history, or I really hate Excel, and I really hate math. And even though I've gotten a few A's on this test, or I've gotten all these projects complete, I don't want to do this for a living. And honestly, that momentum, no matter how much you build, that motivation is just going to drop to a lower level. So I want to kind of conclude with some final tips that actually have helped me. And I've gotten a lot done that I don't want to get done, because inevitably, you can't just rely on passion for everything in life if you're a normal person. There's chores you have to do. There's garbage you have to take out to the back. There's, books you have to read that you don't really want to read. There's, activities you have to do. Grocery shopping, exercise, eating healthy. And I've been able to accomplish a lot of that. And so, other than the Nibble technique, what can I do to do this? Well, there's so many ways of making something mundane at least somewhat fun. Maybe it's not a red hot passion, but you can make it somewhat fun. I think for me, having my earphones on and listening to some really good music, or podcast, or YouTube video, or even throwing on Netflix or an audiobook. Audiobook's my favorite, but I'm listing these others for you just to give you ideas. Those things kind of help me out. So when I'm taking out the trash, I realize, it's not, first off, it's not even that big a deal. It's a 2-minute walk at most. But then I also get to catch up on this music or this other stuff. It makes it more fun. And you do still start to build productivity and momentum, but I think what's most important is you have to conscientiously, intentionally celebrate those wins. So when you take out the trash, when you eat something healthy, you really remind yourself about that. You tell yourself about that. You celebrate that in your head out loud. And that really builds momentum. If you don't have any intention or thought or focus or emphasis on that, then you're not going to be excited about it or really acknowledge what an achievement you've made. And when you celebrate those small wins, that's what builds the snowballing effect. Now, what about school? What about those other activities that everyone just kind of hates doing, whether it's studying for tests, doing homework afterwards, or for those people, those young professionals who are now graduated and they're in the workforce? What about, getting that assignment at work that's just kind of numb or dry, or, getting something after work that you have to do that just sucks, doing the laundry, folding your clothes. Part of it just has to do with really making the most of it and also appreciating certain aspects of it. when you see things from different angles, you can start to appreciate things that you may have hated once. When I look at laundry, uh, if I just look at it as a chore as I used to, that's one thing. But then when I look at all the different angles of it, the art of folding laundry, I discovered Marie Kondo and her organization and folding style, and how she's made a, a practice that has millions of followers across the world about staying organized and clean. And then when I look at the fabric and function in the fashion of clothing, and now it becomes more about aesthetics and organization and cleanliness. Um, you know, those things can make you appreciate something that you may have once hated. And then finally, there are activities that really have to do with finding that proper motivation. When you look at heroes like Arnold Schwarzenegger, people who have really accomplished so much, were they so motivated to go to the gym every day, to work on what they did? Well, they had these strong motivators, not just because they enjoyed it, but because they had a goal to be the champion of the world, to introduce an idea to the world that will save lives, to end slavery, to help out people who are starving. You can work with your managers, your coworkers, your company, the companies that you're considering applying for, or who have offered you jobs. You have the opportunity to decide what brings you purpose, and you get to shop around and decide what motivates you. And through doing that, you can find organizations, jobs that kind of will align better with those motivations and your strengths, which will help you not even have to consider procrastination, because you have that purpose, that higher purpose, that's just so important that procrastination isn't even an afterthought. So think about it that way. There's so many different motivators out there that are so compelling, and it may take a little while, especially if you're young, to figure out what fires up your heart. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something life-changing or about saving lives or becoming the world champion. It could be being the state champion, the county champion. It could just be about proving to yourself that yes, you could win first place at this local county event if you put your mind to it, or proving that you can run that marathon even though you've never run more than half a mile. So think about it that way. The intention behind why you do something, starting with why you do it, can make an incredible difference in terms of your procrastination. So forget about those quick tricks and tactics and those gimmicks with, sleep schedule and timers and stuff like that. Sure, all those things help, the Pomodoro technique and all those things help, but chances are, there's so many people that have tried those and they're like, it's helped, but here I am at the end of the day and I'm still more or less the same procrastinating guy. Try my tips out instead. Let me know what your thoughts are, leave comments, and I'm open to ideas myself. Let me know what works for you.